Alright, this video is going to be on using equations, specifically percents equations to find markdowns and markups. And you're going to need to memorize two equations. The equation for markup is the following. The markup amount is going to equal to the percent markup times the original amount. For a markdown, the equation is going to be the markdown amount is equal to the percent of the markdown times the original amount. And notice how the markdown percent and the markdown amounts correspond to each other. Later on, we're going to have to figure out the new amount, which will be well, something I'll cover in another video. But today is just the basics, and these are the equations you're going to use. So let's go ahead and get started. Here, in this example, you need to find the markup amount. The original amount is 460, and the percent of the markup is 80%. Now it's a markup because it's going to make the amount go up. It increases. Markup means the price increases. So you're going to use the formula for the markup. The markup amount is equal to the percent of the markup times the original amount. And so let's go ahead and substitute. The percent of the markup is 80%. We're going to multiply it by the original amount, which is 460. But what we need to do is make the percent into a decimal. But I always tell my kids, make it into a fraction. 80% is 80 per 100. And so we're going to multiply by 460. Now we know here we got 80 per 100, which is 80 hundredths. And do we know how to write 80 hundredths as a decimal? Yeah, that's going to be 0 and 80 hundredths. And so you're going to multiply that by 460. Now, when we get to this point, I usually put the parentheses because it kind of gets confusing with the decimal and with the multiplication dot. And so we just multiply. Use a calculator, enter it on the calculator twice, and the final answer ends up being 368. So the markup amount is 368. And this markup amount is a part of the whole, which is the original amount, that is going to be added to the original amount to figure out the new amount, which we'll talk about later. Let's do another markup amount, but this time with a percent that's greater than 100. Use the formula. Markup amount equals percent markup times the original amount. The percent markup is 115% times the original amount, 130. Let's write 150% as a fraction, 115 per 100. And again, multiply by 130. And even though here we don't know how to write 115 hundredths, which I haven't taught you yet, but you're dividing by 100. And when you divide by 100, you move the decimal over 2 places to the left. And so if you move it over 2 places to the left, you end up with 1 and 15 hundredths. And so you're going to multiply 1 and 15 hundredths times 130. Now, the percent is over 100, so that means it's going to have a whole number. And now you just multiply, use your calculator 2 times, and double check it. And in this case, the answer is 149 and 5/10, and that's the amount of the markup. Now, because the percent was greater than 100, the part, which is the markup amount, is greater than the whole, which is the original amount. All right, then I'm also going to throw out some decimals. Here, we're going to use the same thing, find the markup amount. So we're going to use the formula. Let's substitute the percent markup, which is 81 and 1/10%. And the original amount is 55. Let's write 81 and 1/10% as a fraction, 81 and 1/10 per 100. Multiply by 55. And 81 and 1/10 per 100 means 81 and 1/10 divided by 100. And so you're going to move the decimal over 2 places. And so you end up with 0 and 811 thousandths times 55. And then you're going to go ahead and multiply. Now, in my class, I ask you to round to the nearest hundred. So here we got 44 and 605 thousandths. And so we're going to round to the nearest hundredths. So we look at the thousandth place. And so my rule is 5 or above, you give it a shove. 4 below, you keep it down low. Here we're going to give it a shove. So we're going to add 1 to the hundredths. And so we end up with 44 and 61 hundredths as our rounded answer. And those are the markups, just for this quick lesson. Now let's figure out the markdown amount. Well, we're going to use the same concept, but we're going to use the different formula. Markdown amount is equal to the percent of the markdown times the original amount. And just like the markup amount, the markdown amount is a part of the whole, which is the original amount. But in this case, the markdown is going to be subtracted later. And so let's go ahead and substitute the percent markdown, which is 60%. The original amount is 245. Make our percent as a fraction. 60% means 60 per 100 times 245. And that's 60 hundredths, which is written as 0 and 60 hundredths times 245. And now you just multiply, and the answer is 147. And so 147 is going to be the markdown amount. What's going to happen later is we're going to take that markdown amount and we're going to subtract it from the original amount to get the new amount. All right, the next example is a decimal percent markdown, just like we did with the markup. You're going to use the formula markdown amount equals percent markdown times the original amount. So the percent markdown is 17 3/10%. The original amount is 460. And so write the percent as a fraction. So 17 3/10% is equal to 17 3/10 per 100. Now you're dividing by 100. And so whenever you divide by 100, move the decimal over two places to the left. And so you end up with 0 and 173 thousandths. And you multiply by 460. Then you use a calculator. You enter it twice to verify your answer. And we end up with 79 and 58 hundredths. Here we don't have to do any rounding. And that's how we do markups and markdowns. It's going to get a little more complicated later, but this is just basics. All you're doing is figuring out percents. If you have any questions, reach out. Thank you for watching.